Hello, my spooky friends. This is John, your host of Dairyland Frights in the spookier podcast, Nightland Frights. And I wanted to thank all my spooky friends out there for listening. I truly appreciate it. Please like and subscribe and rate us 5 stars. It helps me make this a better podcast. And make sure you comment what guests you would like me to have on, what topics you would like me to talk about. It's only going to make this podcast better. So again, thank you so much for listening. And please go to my Patreon. Check that out. Become a Parascani for only $3, a spooky friend for $1. And remember, stay spooky. Welcome to Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest and beyond. And today I have on the podcast two of my favorite people, Brandon and Mitch from Haunted U.S. Thank you guys for coming back again. I missed you guys. We had a great time, last year talking about some things or earlier on. And I just love that I can have you back on again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great to be here.
Thank you. So the reason I have them back is not only because I love having them back, obviously, and talking about the paranormal and all that great stuff, but they put out a book. Ta-da, people. Called 30 Haunted Nights in Wisconsin, a haunted travel guide by Mitch Goff, Brandon Rugsy. Aha, I got it. It is. So, folks, I just got it today. So I've been paging through it, but it's been awesome so far. What's really funny about this, before we kind of talk about the book, is I had Tammy from Hollywood Weird Paranormal. She's in LA, okay? And she, came here, Chicago, to the Windy City Parafest. This is the first time she's been in the Midwest. And you got to remember, guys, she's from LA. Well, it's LA. They have the greatest, the ghost, and everything. Yeah, right. And she was just, right, she was just blown away about the stories, the ghosts, everything. I said, yeah, Tammy, this isn't just a flyover state. We have some of the greatest legends and greatest stories. And obviously, it's in this book. So obviously, I'm going to, do my best to help you sell this book, because not only it's a great book, but also, guys, my spooky friends, first of all, Halloween's around the corner. So come on, let's get this book. Let's get this book for your Halloween spooky friends. And guess what, guys? Christmas is coming too, right? That will be here before you know it. So this is a double whammy, as I would say. Give your spooky friends, right? Give to a Christmas present. Hey, give them as many books as you want. Hey, give your friends 3 of these books. One they can put in the car, one they can put, in their cabinet at home, one they can put at work. Go and buy this book. Like I said, I'm blown away by it. But let's start out. Is what inspired you guys to do this? Because this is not an easy feat. This is not like, hey, let's do this. We'll have it done a week later. Woo, this is fun, right? So what inspired you guys?
Well, to start out, I just want to say we will have your check in the mail next week for that endorsement. It was really good. And as a lot of the people, yeah, exactly. As a lot of the people listening to this and who have heard us on your show before will probably know, we produce articles on haunted places all the time. We put out one a week. They're deep dive, these really kind of gorgeously put together, if I do say so myself, articles. And a book was the natural evolution for us. One thing that we found, well, actually a couple of things. The first is for our website, we have to cut things for content, for length, for readability. This book allowed us to delve even deeper into those stories and really give Mitch the ability to really explore the ideas and the research and write to his fullest, I'm going to say the fullest of his powers of writing. And the other thing is we wanted to give our readers something more cohesive. As you go around the website, you are getting one article at a time based on what you find on the website. This is a compendium of 30 locations at once. And we can say, hey, these fit really well together based on the state and based on an adventure you might want to take in our state.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better. What I love about it is broken down to each part of the state. So, like southeastern Wisconsin, southern central,
Mhm.
central Wisconsin and everything. So it's broken down. So if you live in those areas, maybe you didn't even know. I didn't know that bar was haunted. I go to that bar all the time, or that
Yeah.
restaurant, or that house. And the greatest thing about, if you, like I said, if you live in that area, you can just grab this book and be like, "Oh, okay, what do you mean about this? Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that." Or you might talk to, like I did, and I'll get right to it. So I live in Spring Green, so that's south whatever. My direction is pretty bad. But anyway, so a lot of the different things in here I was looking at that I know because I'm just into the paranormal and whatever. But one of my favorite ones is there's different locations that you don't even think are haunted, right? And my favorite one is there's a haunted Subway. Yes, Subway, the restaurant where you go in all the time and give me a sub, whatever. And you don't even think about it. In Dodgeville, Wisconsin, that is 20 minutes away from me. So I was telling, I was talking to Mitch and Brandon a little bit earlier before we got on. So here's my experience with it. Well, not my experience, but an experience where I just wanted to find out. So I went in there and I was able to talk to the manager and stuff. And really, if you read about it, there's some ghost of an older woman that believes, if I'm correct, guys, correct me if I'm wrong here, just step in. I'm not going to hurt my feelings. Supposedly that haunts this place. And there's some things that go on that they report. So when I went in there, I said to the manager, "Hey, is this true? Have you seen anything? What's going on?" She was like, "Well, no, but my assistant manager did." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. So what'd they see?" So the assistant manager, I guess, was driving up one day, had to get into work a little bit early to clean up corporate, blah, blah, blah. Well, she looks through, before she goes in, and she sees this woman kind of like gliding along, you know, well, probably 5:30 in the morning, wherever the heck, it was early, she said. You're just going to think somebody's just walking along, and who would be in there other than the manager, right? To help do this stuff. So she's like, "Whoa, the manager beat me here. I thought I would have beat her here, beat Shelly or whatever." So I'm like, "Okay, fine." Goes in, the assistant manager goes in and she walks in and she goes, "Hey, Shelly, hey, I thought I beat you here and everything." And then she turns around and in here comes Shelly, the manager, pulling up. And she's like, "Oh, wait a minute." And then, Shelly, the manager, comes in and she's like, "Hey, you beat me here and everything. I thought I beat you here." She goes, "No, no, no. You were just here. I thought I saw a woman and I thought that was you." And she goes, "Oh," the manager, Shelly, goes, "Oh, you saw the ghost." Well, that's all the assistant manager needed. She quit. She's out of there. The manager told me a couple other stories. Some other people quit too who have been like after hours, cleaning up and everything. And they see this apparition out of the corner of their eye. And they're like, "The manager showed up. We better get this done. Stop goofing around." And then they're like, "Oh, hey, Shelly." And then nobody's there. So yes, what's interesting about it is people have saw stuff. I guess some paranormal investigators too have local ones have come in. I haven't heard, if they found anything or whatever. But I tried to look into the history and I didn't really find much. Maybe you guys found something or have something to add, but it's again, it's just so weird because you see the subway up close. It's right, guys. It's nothing.
It's a
a
subway.
Yeah.
It's a subway. You
It's a
expect
cookie
like
cutter sandwich shop.
We
yeah,
were
yeah,
we were really lucky it was like gray and rainy the day we went there. Otherwise, it would have been very much just a picture of the front of a subway.
Yeah. And the history there, of course, is as murky as you can usually get with your average, chain restaurant. It was just kind of not there. And then one day it was there. There are some well-established ghost stories and lore as to where exactly these hauntings came from. They didn't come out of a sandwich one day. The story there is before, and many a ghost story starts this way, before that building was there was something else there. And apparently in Dodgeville, on this site where the subway is, there used to be an old dealership, an old motorcycle dealership, particularly Harley Davidson. And it was owned and franchised by a couple, a man and a woman, who legend has it died in a motorcycle accident not far from town, not far from Dodgeville. And after they died, of course, dealership went under and closed, and they tore the building down, and the subway replaced it. And now the spirits of the man and the woman supposedly haunt the building. And when we were on our way through that part of the state, of course, we had to stop and get photos. And it was a dreary, cloudy morning. I wanted to take my opportunity to also go in and ask the poor unsuspecting staff of this chain restaurant whether or not it was haunted. And so we pulled in there at like 10:30 a.m., which had to be minutes after they had opened. So there were 2 people on staff, and we had just pulled in, and that was it. So we were the only people who were there. The rain was just starting. This freezing November rain was starting.
God.
Yeah.
Great.
And so I'm pretty sure Brandon was de-icing the vehicle or something similar.
I was taking photos out in the freezing rain.
Yeah.
Mitch was inside the nice, warm restaurant.
Oh, of course.
Talking about ghosts, and I was being exposed to the elements.
Yes. And, it is kind of a strange situation to walk into a place like a Subway trying to ask them about their hauntings. But it's something, what I like to call cold calling locations, just walking in when they have open hours and just asking them if they have paranormal claims or have ever experienced anything.
Mitch, in this case, was it cold cutting?
Perhaps. I didn't have to cut the line, though.
I'm sorry.
That's it, Brandon. Give him the hook. Give him the hook.
And, so this was our first stop of many that day. And so it was like, it's a good thing to prime on, get the most awkward conversation out of the way first. And so I walk up to the guy at the front, and, I just kind of order. First of all, I order like a normal person at Subway does. And then I ask him, as he's kind of, sandwich artisaning, sandwich artisting my sandwich. Have you ever experienced anything, spooky, paranormal here? And then he's like, yeah. Are you Mitch Goth? And I'm like, what? Huh? I'm like, okay, I'm the one who asks the throw off questions here. We've got this backwards, Mr. Subway guy.
Yeah, Subway guy. Wow.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, and he's like, yeah. We went to high school together, and then his face suddenly just snaps into my memory. He's like, oh yeah, we did. And so, we got to reminiscing there for a minute, and then I asked, softened him up a little bit with memories of high school. Who doesn't have fun in high school?
Yeah, who doesn't have fun? It's not awkward at all.
No. And sure enough, he and the other staff member there both had experiences, both had stories to tell me when I asked him. He had a very common experience, which is basement. Things in the basement of this building where they store stuff would often, be shifted on a shelf or knocked off a shelf. And so, he mentioned that he was always, having to pick stuff up that he was like, I put this pretty far back on the shelf. What is this doing on the floor? And then the other sandwich artist on staff at the time had to close the building, had to, close up for the night one night. And of course, all of that involves shutting off all the lights and then heading for the door. And they had opened up the door and they were heading out, and they turn around, and one of the lights in the far end of like the dining room was on. So it was, one of the first lights they had shut off on their traverse through the building, hitting all the light switches. So they're like, okay, do I go through this dark and spooky building, or do I just come back tomorrow and say, oops, I forgot? And, she said, I came back tomorrow and said, oops, I forgot. I wasn't about to go all the way through that dark building to flip off that light switch.
Mitch, I love it. A Subway, dark and spooky. I love it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's only one Subway like it, and it's in Dodgeville, Wisconsin. The spookiest Subway in America.
It exists in 2 places, Dodgeville, Wisconsin, and our book.
Yes.
Yes. Or an alternate universe. Woo!
I mean, at that point, it exists in an infinite number of places. It is the infinite Subway.
Mitch, when you guys were, and Brandon, when you guys were there, did you get any vibes at all? Or did you just like, the Subway? You know what I'm saying? Anything kind of throw you off maybe a little bit?
I mean, I'll be real. From my side, I didn't actually go in, so my experience had much more to do with freezing rain than Subway.
You got
And true, I'll be honest with you, not at all. It is.
Yeah, right.
Subway. It is a
Yeah, it's
Subway
Subway.
restaurant.
Yeah.
And, maybe the basement is different. Maybe the basement is, 300 years old and there's just a new building pasted on top of it. I didn't see the
Yeah.
basement.
Yeah.
Maybe it is super eerie and spooky down there.
Yeah.
But upstairs, the space you see as a customer is just as Subway-y as any other place.
Subway. Yeah. I've eaten in there. Me and the family has eaten in there many times. Yeah. That's what I love about places, right? Like that, where it's just totally inconspicuous. It's just like there. And you're like, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So moving on, just staying in my area, and then guys, I'll obviously let you guys talk about some of your highlights and maybe some lowlights if you guys want to talk about some fun
Oh,
stuff.
wow. Yeah.
So Taliesin, that is haunted. And one of the biggest things with that is they're because I've had paranormal investigators reach out to me, from different states, and they're like, "Hey, John, could you contact them so and give me information so I can call them and set up a time to investigate." I don't know if you guys hear this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're kind of very guarded about doing that because there is obviously it's very historical. You got to trust the people coming in. You might, I don't know, bump something or break something that, so I understand that. But one of the biggest things about that location is people were murdered on that location.
Mm-hmm.
Some people died. And I don't know if you guys want to go through it. You can get a highlight view of it because it's a huge place. A lot of people don't understand. I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright wanted to have that to be self-sufficient, meaning he wanted his staff to eat there, sleep there, live there. It's a city within a city, basically, grow your own food and all this other stuff. And then, it just unfortunately was some very tragedy that kind of left to some paranormal experiences. So I don't know if you guys want to elaborate that a little bit to my audience about what happened. That would be great.
Yeah, Mitch, feel free.
Yeah. So as far as that location goes, it's featured briefly in the book because we actually didn't get the opportunity to tour it. It was closed due to adverse weather conditions that particular day. But we absolutely did hear the stories of the paranormal reports. But you are absolutely right. They are very, very guarded about that sort of thing.
Yes.
And that's something we encounter a lot, not just in Wisconsin, but all over the United States. Particularly, I find that the bigger the name associated with a location, the more guarded they tend to be. Kind of like similar, down in Tennessee, Graceland. Lots of people see Elvis's ghost and Elvis's apparition around Graceland, but they're not letting in paranormal researchers every day. They have their own narrative, their own thing they want to present. And particularly, when you're the kind of investigators that we are, the kind of researchers that we are, when you let paranormal researchers into a space, they're going to get their own content. They're going to collect photos, videos, research that, it's easier to control a narrative for whatever purpose you have it when, you do that as few times as possible. And so, Frank Lloyd Wright was obviously a very eccentric guy when he was alive. He had some very big ideas and some wild and interesting attempts to realize those ideas. And, the people who administrate his estate and essentially control the way his life is perceived at this point are, of course, very guarded about that because he was a big name who did a lot of interesting stuff. And so they keep those cards close to their chest. And I don't blame them for that at all.
Right.
Anyone or anything with a big reputation has that responsibility. And so we were just happy to feature it at all because it is a very interesting place with a grisly chapter in its history and a ton of very oddball chapters as well. And we love stuff like that.
Yeah. And so so for you listening, my spooky friends listening, say, what happened? You go online, look at it. There's actually a newspaper article. This is not made up. This is an urban legend. Supposedly Frank Lloyd's Wright, just really a highlight here. Look at is having an affair with one of the groundskeepers, I believe, or one of the staff. Well, she broke it off. They were inside this one building eating lunch. He didn't take it very well. Long story short, he poured gasoline all over, or, whatever. He poured all over the building, nailed everyone in. lit the thing on fire. Luckily, there were people who did escape. I believe, if I remember correctly, the children, I'm not sure if his Frank Lloyd wife's escaped. I believe she did. I'm a little fuzzy on that. Uh, in other words, it was for the time. This is talking in I believe the 30s or 40s or something to that effect. It's pretty crazy. You know what I mean? I mean, you did not think about that, that someone would take being jilted. Today we hear that and we're like, oh boy, here we go again, right? Crazy people out there. But back then, you wouldn't think someone would go to that extreme. I mean, the families were in there, other workers were in this building having lunch. And this guy just, I don't like you anymore, so I'm going to burn you alive. And then you, like I said, I'll probably do a feature on it. I haven't done it yet, just because it's a very short, very horrendous kind of story to talk about. I'm not really into true crime. This would be constitute under true crime, but it's bad. And a lot of people have seen Frank Lloyd's wife, supposedly, they call her the White Lady, or everybody calls them the White Lady nowadays. There's so many White Lady ghosts kind of just floating around there. But no one has, again, let me stress, folks, no one has evidence of this at all because, again, like Mitch said and Brandon said, it's strictly guarded. If you sneak up on that, if you try to, I've heard kids sneaking in around Halloween and all this stuff, and they're caught right away. And they, get into big trouble because it is private property. So please, I stress for all your paranormal investigators out there, this is private property. If you're in the area and you want to sneak in and try something, do not do that. You will be arrested and you will be sent to jail.
Yeah.
So please don't
be very
do that.
careful with that. Be respectful of historical places. And this one specifically is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So
correct.
Definitely not this one.
Yeah. Last but not least, the House on the Rock. Were you guys able to spend any time in there? Because I know you said it was bad weather and some other things. Were you able to at least get a little bit of the history from the House on the Rock?
I've spent time there previously, just as a tourist period. That is a wild building.
Wow.
That is a whole experience going through there.
Wow. I highly suggest. By the way, not to get off on this tangent, but American Gods filmed there. And I totally missed being an extra because, I was busy that day, but they did film there. If you watch American Gods, that's by Neil Gaiman or Gaiman, however you want to be. It supposedly the portal of these old gods is through the carousel in the House on the Rock. So what is crazy about it, folks, is you walk through this tunnel and then there's this huge carousel just in the middle of the building. Why? I don't know. Some guy said, let's get a carousel, let's throw it right in the middle. But that's considered a Neil Gaiman, not Gaiman, whatever his book, in his comic book and everything, graphic novel. That's where the gods come through, the old gods. That's their portal and stuff. And like I said, I missed the stupid extra call where I could have just walked around and been in that episode. There's an episode, American Gods, season 1 or 2, I think it's season 2, where they were filming inside there. Yeah, they filmed inside House on the Rock and everything. And Neil loved Spring Green, by the way. He came here several times. He absolutely loved it. That's why in his graphic novels, he talks about Spring Green as the gods. Like, this is one of their portals to come through. And I'm just like, you guys, I totally live here. Where are you, Neil? Let's talk. But yeah, so that place, if that's going to be haunted, it has to be haunted because it has all these different artifacts. It's just, right, guys? You just walk in there. Here's guns. Here's a bunch of dolls. Here's a carousel. So what did you guys find out of there? And what did you guys think of that?
I mean, speaking from personal experience, having been there, I can again reiterate that is a spooky place.
It is.
It has that 1970s fever dream sort of thing going on while you're going through it, because every room is kind of a different vibe and all of it feels just spooky.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Mitch, did you have something to add?
Yeah, it certainly has the spooky vibe, but it's actually a great comparison to make with the subway, because the subway does not have a spooky vibe at all, but there are ghost stories there. The House on the Rock definitely has a spooky vibe to it. There are no really strong and confirmed paranormal claims there. And, there is still a very good reason why it's included in the book. because the book is obviously 30 haunted nights in Wisconsin. It's 30 dedicated chapters to 30, notably haunted locations. But Wisconsin is full of one of a kind, strange, out there, and wonderful places. And so we also in each of our geographic sections in the book, we include lists of oddities. So things that might be haunted, like roads and other roadside kind of artifacts, as well as just one of a kind things that if you're here exploring the hauntings of Wisconsin, that we think you might want to see too, that you're never going to see anyplace else. And House on the Rack is absolutely one of those places. It is truly a one in a trillion kind of invention that someone could conjure this wild place up on top of this really steep, practically mountainous hill. And yeah, so we just had to mention it. We just had to include it.
Absolutely. And there's a thing, I don't know if they call it the infinity room or whatever, but basically you walk out and I don't know if it's still stable, and you walk out and basically you're overhanging the forest, and then there's like a little skylight or whatever, and you can kind of look down and stuff like that. But you guys are right. If I would give anything to spend the night there, just right alone and just check it out. And you got to remember, some of those objects, they might be cursed. How do you know? The dolls, the doll room is freaky. I hate creepy dolls. It's crazy. I'm like, just get me out of here. So so those are some of the interests in my area. But let's get to what you were talking about, the oddities and things like that. So Mitch or Brandon, whoever like to answer this, what surprised you the most when you started doing this book? Like what, maybe a house, maybe a road, maybe whatever that you went, didn't really think that would be haunted, or wow, that's a crazy story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the most shocking story, in my opinion, and I think Mitch and I sort of agreed on this at one point, but of course our feelings about the book sort of change with the day. But Berlin Tannery in Berlin, Wisconsin has one of the wildest stories. Is supposedly when their ghost stories started. So a tannery is a place where leather is made. Skin goes in and leather comes out.
Not human skin.
Well, so the story goes that at one point in I think it was late 70s, early 80s, right, Mitch? Yeah, right around there. This skin comes in and it is intact, fully intact, like very meticulously handled, but it is a human skin that comes in. And the person who sent it in was never found.
Oh.
So, a little shocking.
Wow.
They do attribute that to when the place started being haunted. We actually know the group that runs the tours there, and I know they've had some pretty wild experiences since then. But yeah, that was the most shocking for me. I remember making Mitch repeat himself a couple of times as he told me that story.
Unbelievable. It wasn't like Jeffrey Dahmer was just hanging out, like drove up one day and just said, hey, here's a package,
No, and it was after Ed Gein's time too. So
it was after Ed Gein. Okay.
Yeah.
That was my next guess. Like, here you go. So what are some of the wild experiences there with people who, have had them?
Yeah, I know that the group that is currently running their tours, they've received some pretty wild stuff on their various different ITC devices. Specifically, Zach, who's running those, Blaine Rezak, he got a message come through that said something about pushing him to kill him at one point. So there are some spooky things happening there. In our experience while we were there, we didn't experience anything negative, just a big spooky building that we had a lot of fun in.
Wow. How about you, Mitch? What do you think?
Yeah, at the tannery, people will frequently report that the spirits, if they encounter them, if they're lucky enough to encounter them, they will tend to follow folks around the building basically the entire night or time frame that they're there. So people will report kind of footsteps and the feeling of someone, walking like 1 inch behind you. And so, if you ever stop, they might run into you, that kind of uneasy sensation of, somebody just constantly, you might not actually feel them physically pushing you, but you feel this sense of something is constantly pushing you forward, pushing you to keep moving. And if you're ever in there, it almost kind of makes sense because a lot of the spaces are wide open and empty now, but You can still very much see where the machinery and factory floor areas were. And there were just thin little corridors through this maze of machinery that people would had to go through. During the tannery days, it was probably pretty often that people were stacked up on each other, moving from place to place. And if you're traversing this area, you pretty much have to move. This is an active factory full of meat hooks and ovens and very, very dangerous machinery. So you get where you're going, and you don't really lollygag in these kind of places. And you get that kind of sense like there's some factory manager still there overseeing things and watching you, and they'll be on you if you're out of line. And so anyone who goes there and stays there for long enough tends to have that kind of that eerie feeling.
Yeah, and next to hospitals and asylums, I think factories kind of fall in there because there was no OSHA, right, guys? There was no, I mean, if you don't get your head on a swivel, you fall into one of those vats full of the worst of the worst chemicals. You're not coming out. Yeah, you're drowned. And there are numerous stories of that happening. And maybe kids work there, back in the day. Who knows, right? I mean, that vibe, right? And you got to remember, too, like you said with the manager, they didn't have management courses. It was like, get your ass to work, shut your mouth, and, you cut your hand off, bandage it up, and get back to work.
Rub
right?
some dirt on it.
Yeah, right? So that's full of that negative energy, which, I've talked about numerous times on this podcast, stone tape theory, where things absorb the energy, positive or negative, into an object, into an area, into wherever, and it just stays there, right? And you just kind of get that feeling. So let me ask you this, Mitch. When you were traveling, was there anywhere, because you told me this last time, and correct me, you were trying to get into like a place for like 11 years and you kept bugging them and they finally got you in and stuff. What places or places were you guys with this book that you said, I got to get that in? And Brandon, we got to get that in here, come bribes or whatever we need to do.
Yeah. So it wasn't quite a full 12-year slog to get them on the telephone. But it was kind of a long-term, one location was the Lincoln Tallman house.
The Lincoln
that one, we investigated that for an article, and it's featured in the book as well. One of the South Central locations. Simply, we cataloged a lot of stories there. We had a lot of experiences there. But another place that, I wasn't really expecting to be as open with their claims as they were with us, because historically they hadn't been. But that was the Fair Lawn Mansion in Superior, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
The Superior Public Museums operates that and a few other locations in the Superior area. And they do a fantastic job maintaining and keeping up their museums and showing off some of the most one-of-a-kind spaces that you can find. They have like an old whaleback ship that's one of our oddities. It's the last one ever in existence. And it's just a weird-looking ship with a strange story. Some ghost stories, but they are very used to, once again, holding those cards very close to their chest. So we had heard some whispers of ghost stories at Fair Lawn Mansion for a very long time. I want to say it was almost 10 years I'd been hearing about it. And it was just one of those places that it's obviously a very photogenic mansion, and it's got ghost stories. It's got the history. The person who built it, Martin Pattison, was very involved in Superior and even Duluth, just developing that whole region far north in Wisconsin. And so I just wanted to include it. And so we headed up to Superior on the same trip as we did the subway. The subway was our first stop. Fair Lawn was largely the last stop on that one long journey. And so it's still this ice storm, this days-long ice storm at this point. And we are in Superior, Wisconsin, the farthest north you can go and find a city in Wisconsin, basically.
Yeah.
And we pull into Fair Lawn Mansion 2 minutes after they open on that day. And so we're the only vehicle in the parking lot. We are confident we're going to be the only people here the entire time because there's nobody on the road. There's nobody anywhere. And we have like an 8-hour drive home after this. But anyway, so we get into the main tourist center, which is a small building right off the main mansion. And there are two tour guides on staff. And we introduced ourselves, and we had booked a tour, so we want the history tour, but also we're Haunted U.S. So the here's the ulterior motive we have here. We're very interested in the history, but if you've got
Yeah.
ghost stories, we are dying for some ghost stories too. And these two tour guides just lit up. They were just so
Awesome.
excited to have an
Yeah.
opportunity to tell us all about the things they had experienced in this building, and all of the ghost stories they had collected. And they had only wished that their executive director was there, because their executive director had their ghost stories.
Ah,
And so it was just a wild change of what I had expected from what we had gotten, because previously I tried to speak with them years prior about their claims, and they were very uncertain. They were very kind of, we don't know if we want to highlight that kind
mm,
of that side of our history,
sure.
because it's a big house with a big history. They had
Mhm.
a very wealthy lumber family lived there for decades, and then it was an orphanage for generations. So they have a lot of history to share there. But with a history like that comes lots of potential for hauntings. And we got so many reports and stories from the tour guides there that we were able to make a full and complete chapter in our book. And I believe it's the very last one.
It
And
is.
it ends the whole book on a high note.
Definitely.
Nice. What is your favorite story, guys, that you heard that day?
It's a good question. We heard about a young child who used to roll small toy cars down the banisters, and they had been in trouble for this a number of different times. And one of the tour guides had found there's backup. There's a spooky little door, and by little door I mean like mouse height, a 3-inch tall, maybe 5-inch tall door in one of the molding spaces by the bottom of the wall. Why can't I think of the name for that? Either way. So at one point, they opened this door up, and fully expecting nothing to be in there, it actually had one of those cars in it. Now, is it guaranteed to be paranormal? Definitely not. But is it spooky? Absolutely. And those are the kind of stories that we love.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That reminds me of, let's keep on the topic of spooky houses. So you have in here the Pabst Mansion. I've been to that. The
Yeah.
Brumder Mansion. I've been to that.
Yeah.
The Pabst Mansion vibe I got was, yeah, it's spooky, it's creepy, because you walk up these steps and everything creak, creak, creak.
Mhm.
It's this old Victorian or whatever you want to call it kind of mansion, and it's kind of like I think it was like 3 levels or whatever. I'm trying to think back, but it was, just going in there and seeing creepy dolls and stuff. I did talk to a couple of the guides, and they were like, yeah, we don't put out that it's haunted, but it's haunted.
Yeah.
Kind of attitude. What do you guys hear of that when you guys were there? Were you able to have some discussions and figure out if maybe it's a little haunted?
So when I visited there, it was mostly tour based. So the guides there were not really interested in discussing the hauntings, which is
Right.
totally fine. And I'll be honest, walking through the whole building, as much as we see that and think, wow, that's a really impressive, old,
Right.
spooky looking building, it
Yeah.
really was just gorgeous and quiet in there.
is.
And taking photos throughout was serene and wonderful.
Yeah,
So
right.
I didn't get a spooky vibe in there at all. I just enjoyed my time so much.
Yeah. Mitch, anything to add about that one?
No, I'm honestly kind of at this point a bad judge of how spooky old houses are, because it's one of the more common locations that we end up visiting is a historic house museum like the Pabst Mansion is, and so they they don't end up all looking alike, and that's something I love about them.
Right.
But we live in houses. We get used to the vibe that houses give off, and
Right.
I've lived in a lot of old houses growing up. And so the creaky steps, the dark kind of smelly basement, it's just
Right.
kind of like, that reminds me of growing up. It's not like I'm spooky scared of it. So an old house has to work overtime for me to be creeped out by it.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah, I think same for me there. It's so like, you've been in an asylum's basement at some point, and it's like, oh yeah, this old mansion is just pretty.
Yeah, it's just, oh, look at this. I'm not frightened for my life and want to run. What did you guys think of the Brumder Mansion? Because that is, I think it's still an active bed and breakfast.
It is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know I did a episode on it, and people have had some experiences there. So you guys want to share that with my audience?
Yeah, so I've actually been there quite a lot. I was previously in a paranormal group that ran public investigations there.
Okay.
And so I've spent time like intimately familiarizing myself with that place. And there was one night that I had an experience there. So having been there, you know that the third floor used to be servants' quarters and then kind of apartments for a little while. And there's only one entrance to the third floor. Third floor is a long hallway with 2 rooms at the end of it, or 3 rooms at the end of it, sorry. And this night, we had just wrapped up a public investigation. We had just kind of ushered everybody out and we were packing up. It's about 2 a.m. And I'm going up there to grab equipment. And I turn the corner to look down the hallway to go to the rooms, and I see someone pass between these 2 rooms. Clearly a woman, but I didn't really make out any more than that. Just kind of clocked like, oh, there's a person here. Somebody forgot a wallet or a purse or a phone. I'm going to go help them find that and then help them out of the building so that, they don't end up lurking in here or something, get lost or hurt. So I go to the room that they walked into, and there's no one in there. And the only other exit from this room, other than walking past me, was like a 3-story window. So yeah, it's a really, really cool place. It was supposedly one of Al Capone's stops when he was running rum. There was a speakeasy in the basement where one of the bouncers was killed, and his spirit is supposedly down there. And there is an old tunnel for running that rum that has been since sealed, but is down there and is one of the kind of star locations for activity in the building.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. It's so much history in there and people having experiences. That's what makes it so interesting. Mitch, anything to add about that mansion?
Yeah, because I was also with the team doing public events there for a little while, and the probably the most notable thing comes from the basement speakeasy area, because when we were hosting the public events, the downstairs area of Brumder Mansion is almost entirely taken up by this kind of stage presentation area, but obviously it's a basement. There are utility areas that need to be had, and it kind of runs a snake serpentine pattern around the backstage area of this kind of downstairs theater. And so when you're setting up for, a dozen people in a space like that, we would set up chairs and it would snake all the way through this utility area and just kind of go around the outside of the basement. And I ended up at one far end of this essential snake of people that ran all the way through the basement. And where I ended up is right behind the stage curtain. And you could see a bit of light through about an inch underneath the stage curtain. And so we started an EVP session, introduced folks to what EVP was and how you do it. And so we started asking questions. The people on the tour, the event, started asking questions. And through that process, so nothing really started out happening at first, but as people asked more questions, I watched the oh gosh, what do you call it?
The meter or
The
Mel? Ram?
Oh, not the meter at all. The thing I was sitting in
curtain?
front of. Curtain. There we go. Stage
Okay.
curtain.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah. It looked like a wall to me, but then the wall started moving. The curtain started to sway. And at first I didn't give much credence to that because, air can shift and it's a curtain. It'll start shifting back and forth, but it started to do it pretty significantly. And then it would slow down between people's questions. And then it would start up again after they asked their questions. So it seemed kind of shifting on its own volition. And as soon as the EVP session stopped, it calmed right down. So that was a peculiar happening there at Brumder Mansion, that's for sure.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like it. Yeah. And, speaking with Al Capone, a lot of people, associate Al Capone with Chicago and stuff, and that's very true. However, he was in Wisconsin quite a bit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Brumder Mansion. So let's go on to the other one, Little Bohemia. That was, where they had this famous shootout and stuff. And if you watch Public Enemy with good old Johnny Depp, a Michael Mann film, it's a pretty good film. Supposedly there's still bullet holes. I have never been to it. But supposedly there's still bullet holes. Yeah, so talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Little Bohemia so the story there is was a small kind of rustic motor lodge, basically a motel with some hotel upstairs for largely hunters, because the area where it is far, far northern Wisconsin. It's called Manitowish Waters. It's very woodsy, very rustic. And still today, its biggest industry is deer hunting season. And so this lodge is largely for hunters, but it is and was in the early 90s extremely secluded. And so right after John Dillinger escaped from jail in the 90s, he and his gang of Chicago ne'er-do-wells, rum runners, criminals, they decided Chicago's a little too cop-filled for us right now. So we're going to go as far north as we can get. And they had a tip that the owner of Little Bohemia was a cool guy. He wouldn't mind some gangsters in his mess. So they all head up there. I want to say it's about half dozen people, John Dillinger and 5 other guys, I want to say. They head up to Little Bohemia, and they slide the owner of the inn a big wad of money and say, we're not here. Ignore us. And so they try their best to do just that. But these are gangsters. These are Chicago boys. These are city boys who just want to make trouble. And trouble they do make. They get into all sorts of things. They start, just shooting guns in the air in the middle of the night because, they get drunk and hammered in the middle of the Wisconsin woods. What are you supposed to do?
Right.
And eventually the owner of this place gets really sick of these people being here. And so he heads down the street and calls the FBI. And the FBI has been searching Chicago like mad dogs for John Dillinger. So to hear he's 300 miles away, kind of miffed him a little bit. But they get on a plane and they rush in there with no plan at all. They drive up to Little Bohemia and they just walk through the woods towards this lit up lodge. And people come out. People spill out in front of them, and the FBI opens fire on these people. These people were deer hunters, and one of them was killed in the crossfire. And of course, this massive firefight alerts John Dillinger and his gang, who are not at the front of the building at all. They are in the back, and they say, oh, crap, let's get out of here. And so they slip out the back and out the side. They take some shots at the FBI to keep them at bay and get away. John Dillinger and his men kill an FBI agent. The FBI killed an innocent bystander, and every single criminal got away scot-free. It was a massive, massive embarrassment for law enforcement, a huge boon to the criminals of the world, and a massive tourist draw to Manitowish waters every year since then. And Little Bohemia no longer has overnight stays, but their restaurant still operates. They have a museum dedicated to John Dillinger. And yes, in the trees around the building and in the building itself, the bullet holes that the FBI shot through the building are still there, and they're their own exhibit, basically.
Yeah.
And now, of course, there are reports of the spirit of the FBI agent and the spirit of the poor bystander still lingering around Little Bohemia.
Yeah. Did you guys have a chance to investigate it all, or were you just there again to take pictures and get a little bit of history?
Yeah, much more the latter. Unfortunately, when we got there, it was during their service hours, and we were, I believe that was the last location on a long trip. So we had to kind of fit it in. And unfortunately, we couldn't spend the night there.
Yeah, it still has all the spaces where you could have spent the night in the 1940s, but they're well past that era. But they keep up very regular business hours, and they're very open about their stories if you happen to stop in when they're open. But I don't think they presently do any overnight investigations anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that probably makes sense. Again, similar to certain other buildings, very well guarded about certain things. Totally get that.
Yeah.
So we cannot talk Wisconsin without talking bars, right? And haunted bars and stuff, right?
Yes.
So I don't think, I'm a little bit fuzzy on this one, but I remember going to Shaker's cigar bar and stuff like that, but it's changed or something. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that was kind of gangster hangout too, as long as we're staying with that theme. They still have, I guess, some gangster, I would say, residual, whether it be, ghosts or just areas where people were on the lookout for the cops when they were doing in Prohibition and stuff. So what did you guys think of that? And talk a little bit about the history of it.
Yeah, so Shakers has a bunch of very, very interesting claims, from gangsters that were poured into the concrete in the basement to a very, very brutal murder that took place on the 3rd floor. Shakers really has a lot of that gangster history, and we're again, talking about Al Capone running alcohol and running a speakeasy through there during a time when that was a much simpler area of the state. It wasn't the first ward like it is now, where it's, built up and there's a lot of stuff there. It was much more port town sort of thing going on. And one of the more interesting claims there has to do with a very large and very heavy safe in their basement. Now, they have not been able to open this safe. It was there when the current owner bought the building, and it weighs genuinely hundreds of pounds. Now, every once in a while when the staff come in, they will find this safe has been dragged across the floor and repositioned with no explanation, and nobody will own up to doing it. So that's one of the more interesting claims we've ever heard. Like, just ghost trying to get in a safe. Why not?
Yeah, that's interesting to me, because why would you want to do that? But okay, maybe, that would be probably a thing they would do to people, put them in a safe and then, oh, they're dead now, and then take them out again. And yeah, it was just terrible. What other bars in Wisconsin in this book that you guys have that are just pretty haunted too?
Yeah, there's one further north from Shakers that also, once again, has a mob connection. Another surprising thing that we found doing the research and the work for this book is how many places do have Chicago mob connections. Because you would anticipate places in Milwaukee like Shakers being so close to Chicago would kind of have that connection. But, even far, far north and in odd areas of Wisconsin, you find that, Al Capone may have been here, or at least his operation was. And a place further north up in Door County, the peninsula of Wisconsin, a place called Shipwrecked Brew Pub. That's another place with a pretty well-established mob connection from, its time supposedly as a speakeasy, because it opened in the early 1880s. At that point, logging was the big industry up there. So it was a rough and tumble kind of logger bar. And that held all the way to Prohibition. And then it sort of became a restaurant, but a restaurant. There were the basement was the most productive area in that time, the area where they could produce bootleg alcohol and store molasses and things. And so Al Capone was supposedly the ringleader of that operation. It was a central to his supply chain down in Chicago, bringing things from Canada to make liquor wholesale with. And of course, crime followed wherever his operation went. And so in the 1920s, there was a story that some IRS or really kind of pre-IRS, very early IRS agents at this time, federal agents, federal tax collectors, came a-knocking at the door of Shipwrecked Brew Pub on the belief that Al Capone himself was there, because that's a super, super smart idea. We're gonna go find the El Chapo of our era and we're gonna hand him a tax bill, and then we're gonna live to see tomorrow. That's what's gonna happen. That is not what happened. These tax collectors vanished off the face of the earth, and the story goes that they are buried in the basement of Shipwrecked Brew Pub. And what a strange place for Prohibition-era law enforcers to be, but the basement of a bar.
Yeah, that's perfect
And
irony. What irony?
yes,
That's
and
pretty ironic.
that's not even the only spirit Al Capone supposedly left behind, because Al Capone doesn't supposedly haunt this place. There's a lot of doubt that he ever actually visited it himself, but it's kind of well assumed that it was definitely a part of his operation. And probably even more famous than the unfortunate tax collectors is the story of Al Capone's illegitimate son. And Al Capone did visit the Door County area and, enjoyed himself quite thoroughly in the area. And the end result is a son he supposedly had with a woman in the area. And as his operation went on, his son grew up around Shipwrecked Brew Pub and kind of lived part of his life around this cornerstone of his father's operation, even though he probably very rarely, if ever, saw this man who was his dad. But the story goes that, and there are two distinct versions of this. Either the kid was a teenager around 17 or a young child around 7. Either way, in both versions of this story, Al Capone gets suspicious of his child and puts a hit out on him and has him killed at Shipwrecked Brew Pub. And once again, in either case, this is outlandishly off the wall.
Yeah.
But in one version of the story, this is a 7-year-old child that Al Capone is getting so paranoid that this child is going to go to the cops and rat him out that he has him killed. And you think it's crazy, but Al Capone was kind of really a crazy guy.
He was.
He was eccentric. He was insane. He had syphilis of the brain throughout much of his criminal life. And the end result is he was a very, very, very paranoid man. And, we like to romanticize and
Right.
look at the 1920s gangster era as these kind of anti-hero characters. But, these were criminals at the end of the day. And that story really kind of highlights that, the lore is, anyway, that he murdered his own young son just to keep away from the cops. That it really puts him in a different light and a far truer light in my mind. And of course, the son supposedly remains at Shipwrecked Brew Pub up in the attic where he supposedly was made to live for much of his life. And so now he still apparently playing, making himself known, making noise up there, stomping around in the attic when nobody should be in the attic of a bar at any point in time. And a very popular story is that his apparition will appear on the roof in the middle of the night, and the police will get calls. There's a little kid on the roof of this bar, 2 stories tall. He's going to fall off and die. And so police rush over there, and there's never.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love stories like that, where people say, I saw, there's a little boy, he's in the middle of the street or something. You got to, and then the cops show him like, yeah, well, what are you talking about?
Yep.
So one of my favorite stories out of all of these, just because it's kind of funny and it also is scary, is like hotels in Wisconsin, obviously are haunted. And the most famous one is the Pfister Hotel. That is where, not typically, but sometimes the opposing team who are playing the Milwaukee Brewers will stay. And there's been numerous stories. I just got one from Hollywood Weird Paranormal from my friend Tammy, who talks about when the Dodgers were there, there's a player called Mookie Betts. And when he was there, he had an experience. So, you guys talk about your experience, but I thought this was a fun one where Mookie Betts was like sitting there getting ready to go to bed and everything. And then all of a sudden his TV would turn on and he'd be like, well, this is weird. What's going on? Okay, I'll turn it off again. And then like a faucet would turn on or like clothes would go missing or there's all these different things that would happen. And that happened numerous times to players. And I know some players will not stay there. They're like, nope, not happening. Or they'll leave in the middle of the night and be like, I'm getting a place over here. So what stories have you guys heard regarding not only like Major League Baseball players who are like, you think, oh, these are big guys, they paid a lot of money. How could they get spooked? And they wound up running like little kids. Any other stories you want to share about that hotel? Because it's so rich in history.
Yeah, we do often hear kind of the standard stories you expect. Footsteps in the hallways that can't be explained, the sounds of running children. That's kind of the classic one, having visitors, again, like you were saying, leave in the middle of the night. There is a woman's apparition there who tends to sit at the end of your bed, supposedly, if you're in one of the 5th floor rooms. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. Unfortunately, the Pfister is very sort of locked off about speaking about their ghost stories.
Yeah. And again, it's the same thing too, they, a lot, they know it's haunted. Like if you go in there, the staff is like, yeah, it is, but they don't really bring it out. But people have had numerous experiences in there. The owner, supposedly, Mr. Pfister, supposedly walks along and he's supposed to be a friendly guy and stuff like that. No one, has ever reported like an apparition coming in and destroying and, killing people or something like that. Similar to like the Congress Plaza Hotel, where people who have killed themselves have jumped out of like the 14th floor window, 13th floor window and everything, just some horrific stuff. But it was really interesting with the hotels and stuff. So any other hotels you guys want to bring up that might surprise you or surprise our audience that I didn't know that was haunted?
Yeah. So obviously the Pfister Hotel is just steeped in history and it's got hauntings pretty much because it's just lived its life for so long in Milwaukee. But we had the opportunity to stay at another hotel that is kind of the opposite. It was only built in 2004, So it's about 21 years old right now.
Wow.
And yet it's more than its fair share of ghost stories. And that's St. Brendan's Inn up in Green Bay. And the story behind St. Brendan's is, well, most of the story is that that whole area of Green Bay is largely new. There are some historic structures, some contributing properties that survive development, but most of that area was residential space early on in the city's life, but a huge swath of it was supposedly the city's one cemetery. And of course, when development came in, they moved the cemetery and built all of this stuff on top of it. And St. Brendan's is one of the buildings that is built directly on top of what is said to be basically dead center city cemetery. And so a lot of these claims come from, the land that was here before was haunted before. So of course you built something on top of it, that building is going to be haunted too. Along with that, they've got so many reports that stem from the graveyard upstairs in the guest rooms, where people will report things like the faucets turning on, lights coming on and off, footsteps, voices. But down in the dining room, there's actually already a ghost story from St. Brendan's itself, related to St. Brendan's itself. So from shortly after it opened to the late 20-teens, there was a fella who worked as the janitor, the main janitorial staff for the restaurant and the main lobby floor. And that guy was well known as a very impassioned worker and someone who cared very deeply for St. Brendan's as an institution. And so when he passed away, he essentially worked until the day he passed away. Ever since then, people have reported his spirit coming back and, keeping tabs on things. He wasn't the guy running the restaurant, but he knew how the restaurant was supposed to be. And so the story goes that if ever, a cup is not set the right way, he'll set it the right way. If at the end of the day, chairs are still, not pushed in, he will come by and he will push them all in. And there are staff members who have said they've come in and literally watched a chair push in by itself in the restaurant. So they've got a very helpful haunting down on the first floor, helping keep things in shipshape condition.
Yeah, keeping everything together and stuff like that. That's always nice to have a helpful ghost, but it'd be kind of annoying. It'd be like you set your glass down and it moves, and you're like, oh, set it back. Come on. This is ridiculous. So a lot of these places, like I said, they keep a little guarded, and you got to make sure you get permission to get in and so on and so forth. But there are places that are in this book that you can go to right now. That's probably in your area, or you can drive to, and that is roads. So Wisconsin has numerous roads. For example, Bloody Bride Bridge, which is fascinating. Highway 12 Phantom.
Yes.
Boy Scout Lane, among others. There's another bridge, you guys help me out with it, where supposedly a mother and a child drowned went off the bridge and drowned in the river, and I can't remember the name of that. Right now it's escaping me. I gotta grab your book here and read about it. But what is your famous, or most infamous road that you guys are like, you guys gotta check this out? Like, check this out and see what you think.
I personally think the Highway 12 Phantom is easily the most interesting of the haunted roads in there. I think Mitch is probably going to say it's Paradise Road, but we agree to disagree on that one. But the Highway 12 Phantom is really interesting. Just outside of Baraboo, there's this stretch of highway, and it really goes through some fairly desolate areas. I shouldn't say desolate, just not built up. A lot of fields out there. And they say if you're driving at night, you will see a hitchhiker on the side of the road walking. And anybody who tries to stop and pick this hitchhiker up, usually he's in a green jacket. He looks like he's from about the 60s or 70s. And when you stop to pick him up, he disappears. And you go, whoa, that's weird. And you get back on the road. And another mile or two down the road, you see the same guy. And it keeps happening. And it is such an interesting story. I don't think anyone has any evidence of this guy getting in the car, or any stories of what happens if you actually get him in the car. But yeah, that's one of the wilder hitchhiking ghost stories that I've ever.
Yeah, and I know the Bloody Bride Bridge. Supposedly, you go over this bridge. I believe it's in Stevens Point. You go over, and the bloody bride will be in your back seat. So that's pretty unnerving to look at your rear view. There is in that story, maybe you guys mentioned in here, like I said, I haven't read the whole book. I'll be doing that tonight. One of the things is a police officer, similar to, with Al Capone's son, hey, there's whatever, was supposedly going over the bridge and saw this, which is, if you saw a bloody bride in a wedding dress, like, wouldn't that be like something? How did that happen, right?
Yeah,
That's
if you're a police officer, that's bust a U-turn and figure out what's
Yeah.
going on.
yeah,
That's
right, and
that's
that,
not
yeah,
pull that in and call
yeah,
it a night. That's,
yeah.
go do.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, right, and then supposedly the story is, the police officer went to help get her in the car. If you get this bride in the car, she doesn't say anything. You're like, oh my god, we got to get you to the hospital. Whoa, you're probably going crazy and flipping out, right? Because a bride and bloody. That's come on. And then when you get over the bridge, poof, gone. Similar to the Highway 12 Phantom.
Hmm.
Boy Scout Lane is really interesting to me because that is an urban legend, guys. Would you classify as an urban legend?
Definitely.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
that is right. A number of Boy Scouts were killed by a serial killer, I've heard, and then a pedophile, and then it's like
Yeah.
all these different stories. And you're like,
Yeah, there's a reason it isn't a full entry in the book.
yeah, it's an
I think
interesting.
I think we can agree the veracity of that story is a bit in question. It
Yes,
is definitely a place called Boy Scout Lane, but
yes,
the story, frankly, is a little dubious.
right. It's an
It is
urban legend.
something that we wanted to cover in the book because it is an urban legend that folks reading ghost stories might want to check out, might want to stop. It is a gorgeous road. It would be a cool walk, but as it stands, I don't think that we're behind the story of kids getting chopped up.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and that's the case with, a lot of haunted road stories, as it ultimately is a piece of urban legend or something of the like. And one thing that we found is, it kind of depends on the haunted road whether you get that kind of eerie vibe from it or you get kind of the subway vibe from it.
So
And
way back.
a subway vibe example is definitely the Bray Road outside of
Right.
Jefferson, Wisconsin, famous for the Beast of Bray Road werewolf legend. It's mentioned in the book, but you go out there, and to say nothing of whether or not there's a werewolf out there, there are farm fields out there. It's not a road that's hugged by woods. You get out of your car and you can see for miles in either direction. It's kind of wide open, and there's not much mystery out there. At night it's a little eerier, but if you've got night vision or a thermal camera, you can see once again for miles around you. The werewolf is not going to come out of nowhere at you, so to speak. But, probably the eeriest, creepiest haunted road we encountered, and quite possibly at this point, the most eerie haunted road in the state of Wisconsin, is Buffalo Ridge Road.
Mm.
Up in Door County again. Buffalo Ridge Road's reports are just creepy by themselves. The ghosts only come out once the road turns to gravel, because it starts out paved and then it turns to gravel, and then a few miles down the road it ends on a T intersection. But the ghosts only come out in the gravel area. So you drive down this winding, heavily wooded space to where it just becomes gravel. And the reports that come out is that spirits will dart from, side to side on the road super fast and right in front of your car as you're driving. And then as you go further, they will sprint out of the woods on all fours like an animal. These are human forms, but they are running at you like a dog into your headlights directly at you. And when you get to it's eerie and strange by itself, but when you get to the gravel area, the bends and turns in the road become steep and sharp, and the woods get just clench around the vehicle. And so you have almost no space to do anything other than but continually move forward. So once you start passing those bends, there's no reversing. So
Yeah.
you are stuck going forward, and if anything rushes out at you, you are just subject to it.
Yeah,
And
my god. Yeah, or screaming. You can scream, I guess, if you want
yeah,
to.
Yeah. Screaming, urinating, there are all sorts of things you can
Yeah,
do, but none of them are really going to help you.
absolutely. So, the fun part of the book, before we wrap up here, is oddities. Okay, so what's your favorite Wisconsin oddity? There's the six pack, there's all this other crazy stuff in there. What do you guys like the best?
Mitch, why don't you take that one first?
Yeah. So I'm not going to say the six pack is my favorite, but I do have a
Fine, six-pack.
great memory of the six pack because the world's largest six pack was a thing for many years. The old style beer. They stopped making that some time ago, and for years the silos that stored that beer were the world's largest six pack. They painted it like that old style beer six pack. But then, when old style went out of business, they repainted all of that. They erased the world's largest six pack. But the city of La Crosse around it, kind of came together. And as soon as old style, the brand, was reintroduced by the owning company, the city was like, bring back the six pack, bring back the six pack. So they repainted it and they revitalized these storage silos into this roadside attraction that it once again is refreshed and new. But once again, they're making old style at this factory where this is. So it was middle of November when we were there. We pulled up and you get out and it doesn't matter what time of year it is. The air is thick and humid and it tastes like old style beer.
Oh
Blocks
my
in
God.
either direction. The air is just thick with beer flavor. And so when you stop to see the world's largest six pack, you get a little extra in the air around you. But probably my favorite oddity is a place in Wisconsin that is truly one of a kind in the whole world. You're not going to find another place like it. And that's what I've taken to call the corner of the world. And what it is it's in our book as the 4590 geographical point, because that's its technical name. That's its Christian name, 4590 geographical point. And there are 4 points on the globe that are halfway between the equator and the prime meridian and halfway between the international dateline and the Greenwich meridian. So as close to corners as you can get on a sphere. And 2 of them, the 2 southern hemisphere corners, are in the middle of the ocean, totally inaccessible. One of them is in China, far, far west. So it's days of mountain hiking just to get to it. And only one person has ever recorded their trip out there because it's just so arduous and dangerous to hike out there. And there's nothing out there to mark the spot. It's just a piece of mountain. But the 4th corner of the world is a 20-minute drive west of Wausau, Wisconsin. It's in a little cornfield. They have a little parking lot built right into this cornfield. You pull up and you take about 150-foot hike out down the side of this cornfield, and there's this big stone monument in the ground there's a cross in the monument exactly where the point is, and you can walk out and you can stand right on the corner, planet Earth.
I love that.
There's not another place in the world where you can do that.
Wow. I love that. You definitely have to check that out. I definitely have to check that out. Brandon, how about you?
So there was one that we had very little expectation for. It was a place we were stopping. It was actually the night after we stayed at St. Brendan's, and we rolled up on the National Railroad Museum in Green Bay. And we expected like, oh, yeah, it's a modern building. It's going to have some cool old railroad stuff, and we're going through, and it's ephemera from various different eras of rail travel. And then we get to their back room, and this place looks like nothing from the front. Highly recommend going. We get to this back room, and it opens into a warehouse. In this warehouse are trains upon trains upon trains. It was so incredible. We opened the door and Mitch and I looked at each other and we were like, no, we only have 30 minutes here scheduled. We're going to have to stay longer. And, we ended up being late to the next thing that we had planned just because this place was so fantastic. And we're, exploring all these train cars. I think I have 1,000 photos from that location. We have one in the book.
Awesome.
But if anybody's interested, reach out and I'll send you hundreds more.
Love that. Yeah, definitely. Because that would be something to see. That's crazy, right? Just to be like, what?
And these trains are said to be haunted.
Yes.
They've got the huge engines. They've got, I think, one of the biggest of ever built, if not one of the biggest, the Union Pacific Big Boy engine, which is like, it's literally got big in the name, but it can't be described. You have to see how huge this thing is. But along with that, they have so many passenger cars and things where people would be working, like radio station cars.
Sure. Yeah.
And these
Mail
cars are supposedly haunted. And So when we were getting in the front to get our tickets, we asked the ticket taker, which are any of these cars haunted? Because we didn't know how close they kept those cards to their chest. So we just asked, is there any one of these that stands out as haunted? They're just all of them. So, and they said, I can't really pick one that's most haunted, but if you talk to staff here, everybody's got a story about those trains. The trains in the warehouse, from the mouths of the people who work there, every single one of them's got some ghost story or another. And so they are amazing pieces of history to see. And if you happen to be lucky enough to investigate them in the night, you might see that history come.
Wow. I love that. I love that. So we have to end this because I don't want to end this. I got to talk to you guys for hours. There's so much in this book. However, we have to end it with my favorite cryptid of all cryptids, the Hodag.
Yeah.
So Mitch and Brandon, every time I've had someone else on the show, we're doing the subject of cryptids, I talk about this and everybody loves it. Like everyone, they're like, wait a minute. It's a con man who's this things like made out of paper mache, but you guys have like concerts and like museums and there's the high school's named after it. What? Like they don't believe me. And then they go on Google and they're like, this is insane, John. This is absolutely insane. So the Hodag, please. I mean, I've done it a number of times, but what do you guys have a favorite about the Hodag? Like, why did it just explode like this when it's literally a con man going, just making this up? And it's a great, crazy story that you have to look at that just blew up. Any explanation of why? This doesn't make any sense.
I think you nailed it. It's a crazy story.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things that's so much bigger than the sum of its parts. It gets into the community and everybody's saying like, oh, these hunters came back and they saw a Hodag and they brought one home with them. And I think Mitch was telling a story at one point about the fact that someone had painted a pug and they were saying that this was a Hodag. You find those stories and they become integral to a community. They're things that tie people together in sort of a shared folkloric space. And it's an in-joke. It's an in-joke for the entire group. I don't think anyone in Rhinelander is saying like, oh yeah, no, Hodag's real. I think most of them are looking at it and saying like, oh, this is something that really sets us apart from other cities. This is something that's key to our identity. And that's why it got so big. Personally, I think it's hilarious, and it is such a good mascot. I'd tip my hat to Rhinelander for running with the joke.
Right, Mitch. Anything to add to that?
Yeah. The Hodag exists in kind of a very interesting cryptozoological space, in that so many stories of cryptids are still focused on it is a real thing, and we're going to find it. You can hunt it, and we're going to be the ones to prove that it exists. There's not that onus on the Hodag's shoulders. The Hodag is a tongue-in-cheek hoax. And it didn't start that way. It didn't begin that way. Lots of people in the late 1800s did kind of believe that the Hodag was out there. And, part of what I think made it such a enduring story and so important to Rhinelander is Rhinelander's another one of those northern cities, a very forested town that relies on hunting tourism. And so in the 1880s, that was when the hoaxes were really being driven by the belief that the Hodag is really out there. And so anything to draw hunters from any other place in Wisconsin, you could go hunt deer anywhere, but Rhinelander, you might be able to hunt the Hodag. And so that was probably a very early tourism draw that even when, we can't, shoulder our city's tourism industry on a hoax monster. They still said, this being is worth keeping around, worth remembering. It is, like I said, it exists in a unique space for itself because it is an open hoax. It's also a very unique hoax. There are a lot of cryptids out there that are like human being but lizard, human being but extra hairy, human being 2 heads, 3 heads, human being with wings, and they follow this kind of humanoid but animal structure.
Correct.
And the Hodag is the Hodag. You look at the Hodag, and we've got a great photo in the book of the statue that they have outside the Rhinelander Chamber of Commerce. And this is not a small statue. They are
Correct.
very proud of this beast. And it's just a one of a kind creature. You're not gonna, and in the lore, it's dog sized. It's just got that big face of teeth, the scales, the spikes, but it looks kind of adorable. It looks kind of a thing that if it did exist, you might have it as a pet. And it's endearing. It's endearing for a lot of reasons. It's there's no, dispute to have drama over whether or not someone found evidence of it or not, because there isn't. It's just a fairy tale, but it's a fun fairy tale.
Yeah.
It's a fun fairy tale with fun imagery that, a whole town also decided was fun. And sometimes that just happens. And so it's on their water tower. It's their high school mascot. It's outside their chamber of commerce. And, it's a cultural touchstone. And what a strange kind of scaly, cuddly touchstone it is.
Exactly. And the only two that come close to it, and they both have kind of, I won't say negative, but they have some negative stories, is like Bigfoot. That's the grandfather, right? It's the OG, whatever you want to say. And the Mothman, right? I mean, Virginia adapts that. They have restaurants, they have all these different things. But like both, I mean, the Mothman is, the bridge that people died, and supposedly the Mothman came. There's still stories of Mothman around Chicago, here in the Midwest, and everything like that. Nobody really knows what to make. Is this evil? Is this good? Is it a combination of both? But Hodag it's just fun, guys. Let's have some fun.
Yeah.
Let's have a good time.
He's just a fun guy in the woods.
Yeah, this is a fun. Let's just have some fun and have a good time, and everybody has. And that I love. That is so great. So as we wrap up here, like I said, I could talk to you guys forever, but when they get this book, my spooky friends, get it for you, get a bunch of copies, you throw it in your car and take a road trip. How would you recommend, not to put you guys on the spot, but let's say someone's just bored, a couple's bored, and they get your book and they're like, hey, I'm going to check out some of these areas. Depending where they are, what would you recommend to start? Would you say, why don't you go to, if a road's in the area, try that, or go to a bar, or go to this, or just go crazy and just go, hey, I'm just going to try everything and see what I can do.
I would absolutely say try everything. Start in order, because I know the Shaker or Cigar Bar offers ghost tours. They will welcome you in. They will absolutely answer your questions. I would say that any place you want to go, just give them a shout. Just let them know what you'd like to do, and they'll likely be pretty amenable to that fact. But yeah, I think any place is a good enough starting place. We divided the book into regions for that exact reason, right? So if you're in a specific geological area or geographical area, you can say, hey, here are 10 places right near me that I can go to. And John, that was exactly what you did when you opened the book. You looked right at Spring Green, you found your area, and you sort of looked at those things. So yeah, hopefully that's how people are using it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, we designed it very much to be kind of a choose your own adventure sort of travel guide. So if you're starting in Milwaukee, you've got a great place to start. If you're starting in Superior, you've got a great place to start. If you're starting in Minnesota, Iowa, traveling into Wisconsin, you've also got a great place to start, because you can really start anywhere. And no matter where you're at, you can find the region and start picking out places. And like Brandon said, a lot of the locations, particularly the 30 haunted locations themselves, are quite usually amenable to hearing from folks who want to talk about their ghost stories and maybe explore them a little deeper. So the travel guide is for folks to use pretty much however they would like to use it. And there's about 1 million different ways to explore the spooky spots in Wisconsin.
Absolutely. And let's say my spooky friends, or just anyone listening to this, picks up the book. How can they find you? How can, like, if they have a question for you, Mitch or Brandon, like, hey, I went to this, and you said in the book it was this. Is there anything else associated with it? Like, where can they find you?
Sure. Yeah. So we are on social at Haunted U.S. on just about every platform. We also have hauntedus.com that you can reach out from and get a hold of us there. The book itself is available on Amazon. If you're having trouble finding it, just head to hauntedus.com. We have a nice link right in the header that says book. and that will get you right to it. Yeah, other than that, you can send us an email at theteam@hauntedus.com, and that would be another great way to reach out.
Awesome. And again, like I said, this book is great for not only spooky friends, but if you just want to, if you're not maybe not in the paranormal and you want to do something for the weekend, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
let's get this book and then just check out some areas. Or if you're in an area like I said, and you're like, I didn't know that was haunted. I go to that bar all the time, or that's right down from my street. Just like with me, I have just 3 different areas that basically within a half an hour of me that are haunted or supposedly haunted. So I love that. And that's what makes Wisconsin great. I mean, we have so many. By the way, folks, here's my pitch to you guys. You guys don't have cemeteries in here yet. And you got to do cryptids and cemeteries, and you got to do some urban legends. I'm pitching to you guys. And, I need a little bit of residuals for that. But if you guys do another book, like I said, this is a great book, but there's just so much else. And that's what
There
makes
is.
Wisconsin great, right? It's just so
Yeah,
many.
and we found ourselves, even as we were finishing up the book, saying like, oh, there are these 2 other places we were thinking
I
of
know.
that we'd love to get in here. So yeah, absolutely. There are more books in the future, I think.
I love it. I will look forward to it and definitely have you guys back on to talk about it. So again, thank you so much, guys, for going a little overtime on here because I had just had so many questions and I'm just so excited about you guys put out this book. It's great. And just, like I said, when I have other people on from different states and everything, I'm like, just this tourism, they should pay me. So I'm like, you got to see this and you got to see it. I've had people on from the UK and Australia and the Netherlands, and they're like, I got to get to Wisconsin. Like I didn't think you guys didn't have that. And yes, I mean, with so many different things and in the Midwest and everything in general, there's so many great things. So again, guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Love to have you back on. Maybe closer to Halloween, we can kind of figure out some stories and stuff like that.
Sounds great.
Get back on the book and stuff so we can, have people, obviously buy the book and enjoy it just like I did. So again, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Love you guys and stay spooky. See you guys later. Bye.